Brothers, listen to me. It is my judgment that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God.
The very beginning of your journey. I mean, the owner of the highway personally handed you the receipt.
Wow, so you have complete clearance.
Exactly. He looked right at you and said, you know, the road is yours. It's completely paid for. Just keep driving. Enjoy the trip.
That sounds like a great road trip.
It does. But then, a few miles down the road, suddenly there's a roadblock. Just out of nowhere.
Oh, man. Let me guess. Construction.
Worse. It's a group of guys in, like, reflective vests who have set up this totally rogue makeshift toll booth right in the middle of the lanes.
Wait, really? A fake toll booth?
Yeah, and they aren't just asking for a few coins to lift the gate. They're demanding that you pull over, get out of your car, and completely rebuild your engine.
Rebuild the engine? That's insane.
Right, according to their highly specific, completely unwritten manual. And on top of that, they want you to pay this exorbitant, impossible fee just for the right to get back on the road.
The road you were already invited to travel on.
Exactly. That exact feeling, that feeling of hitting a massive artificial roadblock is literally what happened in the first century.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it, because that is exactly the historical reality.
Yeah, a group of men essentially tried to act as, well, as theological border patrol for the early assembly.
Which caused a massive crisis.
A huge one. So today, for you listening, we are taking on the massive mission of dismantling one of the most misunderstood historical decrees in history.
And we are specifically looking at the events recorded in Acts chapter 15.
Right, Acts 15.
Right.
And to do this, our entire analysis today is guided exclusively by the notes of Mora Uriah.
Which is absolutely essential, to be honest.
Yeah, why is that? I mean, why do we need that specific framework?
Because this text, Acts 15, has been layered with literally centuries of misunderstanding.
Oh, totally. Just piled on.
Right. So to cut through all of that, the notes of Mora Uriah provide us with this meticulously compiled framework.
Like a blueprint.
Exactly. It gives us the first century legal mappings, the precise linguistic translations, and the raw historical data.
So we aren't just skimming the surface today.
Not at all. We are applying a deeply rigorous analytical framework.
I love it.
But before we even look at the crisis that kicked off in the city of Antioch, we have to establish the baseline.
Right, the ground rules for how we're doing this deep dive.
Yeah, the methodology we are drawing from Mora Uriah's notes requires what we call an axiomatic foundation.
Okay, let me just stop you right there.
Yeah.
Because axiomatic foundation is a pretty heavy phrase.
It is a bit academic, yeah.
Right, so for someone listening who might be, I don't know, driving to work or at the gym right now, what exactly does that mean? What is the baseline assumption we're bringing to the table before we even crack open the book of Acts?
Well, it simply means we are operating from the absolute, unshakable baseline of the Creator's unchanging nature.
Unchanging nature, okay.
Yes. We assume the absolute unity and the structural immutability of the divine.
So he doesn't just wake up one day and flip the script.
Exactly. If you look at ancient texts, like Malachi 3.6 or Numbers 23.19, the logic is totally explicit.
What do they say?
They basically state that the Creator does not arbitrarily change his mind or his foundational instructions.
Right, the rules don't just magically expire.
Right. If a foundational moral law was given, it doesn't suddenly vanish just because the calendar flipped to a new era, you know?
That makes perfect sense.
And furthermore, we are operating with what Mora Uriah's notes define as a strict action metric.
Ah, the action metric.
Yeah.
Yes, I've spent like a lot of time looking through these notes, and this concept completely changed how I read historical texts.
It's a total paradigm shift.
It really is. But let's define it clearly for the listener. We are talking about how we measure faith, right?
Precisely. The action metric means we evaluate truth through the strict lens of physical, active obedience.
So it's not just a feeling.
No, not at all. In this Hebrew framework, faith, or emunah in the Hebrew, isn't merely an emotion.
It's not just getting teary-eyed during a song.
Right, and it isn't just a quiet intellectual agreement in your mind where you just nod along. Faith is active, physical execution.
Physical execution. I like that.
Yeah, so to use this framework properly, we have to systematically filter out passive, speculative, Hellenistic philosophy.
Okay, that is a really crucial distinction. Because I think a lot of us, especially here in the West, we're deeply conditioned by that Hellenistic philosophy without even realizing it.
Oh, it's baked into our entire culture.
It really is. We have this Well, this Platonic dualism baked into how we think.
Where the physical and spiritual are totally separated.
Exactly. The physical world is seen as messy or gross or, like, irrelevant. And the spiritual world, our internal thoughts and our feelings, is what really matters.
Right, the idea that the mind is pure and the body is just a shell.
Yeah. So we tend to think, as long as I believe the right abstract theories in my head, my physical actions are totally secondary.
And the analytical framework we are using today completely bars that idea.
It just throws it out.
It flags it as structurally void. In the first century Hebraic paradigm, passive belief is functionally useless.
Wow. Useless?
Yes. Covenantal love, what the Greeks called agape and the Hebrews called ahaba, is intricately, permanently integrated with commandment keeping.
So love is a verb.
Love is absolutely a verb. It is the active guarding of the Creator's instructions.
That completely flips the Western mindset on its head.
It really does. And if you strip away the action metric, you completely lose the ability to decode what the men in Acts 15 were actually fighting about.
Because they weren't fighting over abstract theories.
No, they were fighting over physical actions and legal requirements.
So we aren't dealing in abstract theories today either. We're
right.
dealing with physical reality, historical context, and actual execution.
Exactly.
So to understand the solution that ultimately gets handed down in Jerusalem later in the chapter, we first have to thoroughly understand the crisis that started in Antioch.
We have to look at the roadblock.
Right. We have to look at these men who set up that rogue toll booth. If we dive into Acts chapter 15, just verses 1 through 5, the setup is basically this.
Go ahead, lay it out.
Okay, so certain men come down from Judea to Antioch. Now, Antioch is a massive cosmopolitan Roman city, right?
It's a huge city, very diverse.
Yeah, it's filled with Gentiles, non-Jews, who are recently turned away from their paganism and they've believed in the Messiah.
They've completely changed their allegiance.
Right. But these men from Judea, who are specifically identified by Luke as believers from the sect of the Pharisees, they show up and start teaching these new converts a very specific hardline message.
And what was that message?
They said, if you are not circumcised after the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved.
Boom. There is the toll booth.
There it is. So how do we process that?
Well, this is where we have to apply historical contextualism. Uriah's notes demand that we do not view these first-century Pharisees through a modern lens.
Right. We can't just paint them as cartoon villains who hated grace.
Exactly. That's a massive modern anachronism. We have to understand their geopolitical and their theological reality.
Which was pretty intense, living under Rome.
It was brutal. These were deeply educated men living under brutal Roman occupation. They understood prophetically that the new covenant, like the one outlined in Jeremiah 31, was promised exclusively to the house of Israel and the house of Judah.
Oh, that's a really good point. Their core theological math wasn't actually broken.
No, it wasn't. They knew the covenant belonged to Israel.
Okay, I have to push back a little here. Or, well, at least play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
If they knew the covenant was for Israel, and they see all these random Greeks and Romans claiming to be part of the covenant without formally joining the physical nation of Israel, isn't their reaction kind of logical?
From their perspective, absolutely.
I mean, well, why wouldn't they expect Gentiles to become Jewish? It seems like they're just trying to, I don't know, protect the integrity of the community.
That is exactly how they viewed it.
Right.
They believed they were the border patrol. They were protecting the borders of the covenant.
Okay, so where did they go wrong?
Their error, and it was a massive systemic error that nearly fractured the entire early assembly, was how they defined that border. They were forcing an institutional, man-made immigration protocol onto the nations who were turning to the Creator.
So they were making up the entry requirements.
Yes, they were taking human tradition and elevating it to the absolute status of divine law.
And according to Uriah's notes, this specific immigration protocol has a name, doesn't it?
It does.
We aren't just talking about a vague suggestion to, follow the rules. This is a highly codified legal process called Giyur, right?
Yes. Giyur, it was the rabbinic process of proselyte conversion.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Well, these Judean gatekeepers weren't just saying, hey, you guys should start following the Creator's written laws. They were enforcing a highly specific three-step Pharisaic tradition.
Three-step.
Right. And this tradition was so entrenched in the culture of the time that it was actually later explicitly codified in the Talmud.
Really? Where?
Specifically in tractates Kerato 9a and Yevamot 46b.
Wow, so this was legit institutional law for them.
Exactly. If a Gentile wanted to cross the border and be considered a legitimate part of the covenant community, to be considered saved in their terminology, they had to pass through 3 very specific human-engineered gates.
Okay, let's break down those 3 gates, because this is where the toll booth analogy from the beginning of the deep dives really comes into sharp, painful focus.
It really does.
What were the actual physical mechanics of this Giyur process they were demanding of these new believers up in Antioch?
Well, step 1 was physical surgery, specifically Brit Milah or circumcision.
Okay, but we should clarify something here.
Definitely.
We must be absolutely clear that circumcision is undeniably a foundational biblical commandment given to Abraham, right?
Yes, absolutely. It is a divine commandment. But in the context of Giyur, it was being weaponized.
Weaponized how?
It was being used as step 1 of a mandatory, humanly administrated initiation process just to attain salvation.
I see. They made it the prerequisite for the grace to even apply.
Exactly. Now, step 2 was a ritual bath, known as tevilah.
Like an immersion.
Right, full immersion in living water to ritually cleanse the Gentile of their inherent pagan impurity.
Okay, surgery, then a bath. What was step 3?
Step 3, which is incredibly crucial but honestly almost universally overlooked in modern theological discussions of Acts 15, was a specific temple sacrifice.
Wait, a sacrifice?
Yes.
But we were talking to people living hundreds of miles away from Jerusalem in Antioch.
It didn't matter. The Pharisaic courts demanded an olah, which is a burnt mammal offering.
A whole mammal.
Yes. Or, if the person converting was impoverished, they were required to offer 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons.
Okay, but they still had to offer blood.
Correct. Without the blood of the specific sacrifice being offered physically at the temple in Jerusalem by a Levitical priest, the rabbinic courts deemed the conversion completely incomplete. The person just remained an outsider.
Okay, let's stop and really process the sheer physical and economic reality of this for a moment.
It's staggering when you really think about it.
It is, because this is where it gets incredibly practical and, frankly, totally absurd.
Right.
Imagine you are a Gentile laborer living in Antioch or, maybe Greece or Rome. You work with your hands.
The blue-collar worker.
Exactly. You barely make enough denarii to feed your family week to week.
Is scraping by.
Right. But you've just heard the gospel of the kingdom. You've turned away from the Roman gods, you've abandoned the temples, and you've embraced the God of Israel and the Messiah, Yeshua.
You've had a total life transformation.
Yeah. You believe you are grafted in, you feel the love of the Creator, and then these Judean gatekeepers just show up in your city and tell you, hold on, buddy, you aren't saved yet, you aren't legitimate.
It is an immediate structural roadblock to the grace that was just extended to them.
Exactly. It's devastating. To be saved according to their rules, this poor Gentile laborer has to undergo surgery as an adult without any modern anesthesia.
Which is horrific on its own.
Right. And then, as if that isn't enough, they have to pack up their life, abandon their trade, and somehow finance a perilous weeks-long journey across the Mediterranean Sea.
Or down the treacherous coastal routes.
Right, just to get to Jerusalem. And once they are there, they have to navigate the chaotic, highly monetized temple market.
To buy specific animals at a premium.
Exactly. And then secure the services of a Levitical priest to offer this sacrifice all just to be stamped approved by a Pharisaic court.
It's an extortionate toll booth.
How could anyone outside of the wealthy elite even afford that? It is an exorbitant multi-step initiation fee.
It really is.
It's like being invited to this massive, beautiful banquet by the king, but the bouncers at the door demand you pay them $50,000 and pass a hazing ritual before they unhook the velvet rope.
That is a perfect analogy. The socioeconomic barrier alone is just staggering.
It's impossible.
But the theological implications, as outlined in Mora Uriah's notes, are even more devastating than the financial ones.
Oh, really? How so?
By demanding this specific protocol, these gatekeepers were creating a massive systemic contradiction.
Okay, let's use the framework.
Right. We evaluate this using the principle of systemic consistency, processing the biblical text as an integrated circuit.
So no contradictions allowed.
Exactly. When we process it that way, we see that the Pharisees were functionally declaring that the blood of the Messiah was insufficient.
Whoa. Wait, walk me through that logic.
Think about the mechanics of atonement and access.
Okay.
I understand they were adding burdensome rules, but how does asking a convert to buy a couple of pigeons in Jerusalem functionally undermine the sacrifice of Yeshua?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm wondering.
Well, if Yeshua is the ultimate final sacrifice, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, then His blood is the divine mechanism that brings the outsider near, right?
Right. His sacrifice is the ultimate authority. It's what grafts the wild olive branch into the cultivated tree of Israel.
Exactly. His action tore the veil.
So access is granted.
But if a Pharisee stands at the door of the assembly and says, yes, Yeshua's blood is good, but to actually enter the covenant, you must also go to the temple, buy 2 pigeons, and have a mortal priest sacrifice them on an altar, they are mathematically nullifying the finality of the Messiah.
Oh my goodness. I see it now.
Do you see the math?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if you still need the blood of the pigeon to cross the finish line of salvation, then the blood of the Messiah didn't actually finish the job.
Precisely.
That is wild.
They are saying the Creator's supreme provision is totally inadequate without human bureaucratic clearance and the blood of literal birds.
It is a direct structural assault on the functional utility of the Messiah's sacrifice.
Yes, they were stubbornly maintaining an obsolete covenantal layer that had already been entirely superseded by the order of Melchizedek.
Wow. That is a profound realization. It wasn't just a petty debate about whether they liked Jewish traditions or not.
No, it was foundational.
It was a battle over the supreme authority and the sufficiency of the new covenant itself.
They were demanding a human stamp of approval to validate a completely divine, blood-bought invitation.
So if these gatekeepers were enforcing this massive human-made toll booth, it raises a really critical question for how we read the rest of the chapter.
What's the question?
Well, what exactly were they defending? Because historically, the narrative we hear in almost every modern commentary is that these Pharisees were defending the written law of Moses.
Right, the standard narrative.
Yeah, people say they were defending the 10 Commandments, the dietary laws, the Sabbath, and that the apostles had to hold this council in Acts 15 to basically step in and say, no, we don't do the law of Moses anymore. We are under grace.
Which is a complete misreading of the text.
Right. Because based on everything you just said about the Giyur protocol, was the actual Torah even the thing on trial?
That is the exact pivot point of this entire historical event.
Okay, let's pivot.
And to answer it accurately, Mora Uriah's notes mandate that we apply the principle of linguistic primacy.
Linguistic primacy, meaning we go to the original language.
Exactly. We absolutely cannot rely on standard English translations here because they carry centuries of deeply embedded translational bias.
Oh, yeah. Translators bring their own baggage.
Huge amounts of baggage. Translators often retroject later theological disputes, like, say, the 16th century Protestant versus Catholic debates about grace and works. They project those right back into the first century text.
Which violates historical contextualism.
Exactly. It's a logical breach. So to eliminate that bias, we have to isolate the precise Greek source code used by Luke.
Luke, the physician and historian who authored Acts.
Right. We need to see exactly what words he used to describe what was being argued.
Okay, let's do it. Let's strip away the English flavoring and look at the actual mechanics of the language.
Let's do it.
What is the Greek source code in Acts 15, verse 1? What did Luke actually write down?
When Luke records the demands of these Judean men, he writes that they said to the Gentiles, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved.
The custom of Moses.
Yes. And we have to look at 2 specific, distinct Greek words here to understand the jurisdictional dispute taking place.
Okay, what are the words?
The first word is ethos, pronounced ethos.
Ethos, okay.
And the second word, which we absolutely must contrast it with to understand the legal landscape, is amos, pronounced nomos.
Okay, let's define those clearly, because I have a feeling this is where the entire traditional narrative completely falls apart.
Oh, it shatters it.
So what is ethos?
The Greek word ethos defines a custom, a usage, a habit, or a prescribed right that is based purely on human tradition and cultural practice.
So it's like a cultural norm.
Exactly. It is the way a particular society operates socially. It is an unwritten rule that has gained the force of law through sheer repetition and cultural consensus.
Okay, like standing facing forward in an elevator. It's not a written law, but everyone enforces it.
That's a great example. It's ethos.
And what about the other word, nomos?
On the other hand, nomos means statutory written law.
Written law.
Yes. In the context of the Greek scriptures, specifically the Septuagint, which the apostles actively utilized nomos, is the direct standard translation of the Hebrew word Torah.
Wow. Okay.
And it refers exclusively to the foundational written instructions given by the Creator at Mount Sinai.
Wait, so Luke explicitly records that the men were demanding circumcision according to the ethos of Moses.
Yes.
Not the nomos.
Exactly. They were arguing over ethos.
That is massive.
Yeah.
That completely rewrites how I understand this conflict.
It changes everything.
I mean, the fight in Antioch wasn't about whether these new Gentile believers should obey God's written commandments.
No, it wasn't.
The fight was a jurisdictional dispute over the rabbinic customs of conversion.
You've got it.
It was about the unwritten cultural expectations that the Pharisees had wrapped entirely around the law.
The notes of Mora Uriah apply strict historical contextualism to this exact point.
It's just brilliant.
If these believing Pharisees were genuinely standing up to defend the foundational written Torah baseline, the unchanging moral and civil laws of the Creator Luke, who is an incredibly precise historian with his legal terminology, would have unequivocally used the word nomos.
You would have said they were defending the Nomos of Moses.
Exactly. But because the text explicitly identifies the point of contention as ethos, it redefines the entire chapter.
So if someone today reads Acts 15 and concludes, see, the early assembly got together and definitively decided to abolish the law of Moses for the Gentiles, they aren't just slightly mistaken.
Bro, they're way off.
They are projecting a completely modern argument onto an ancient text. They are fundamentally misdiagnosing the disease the apostles were actually trying to cure.
It is a structural failure and a massive historical anachronism.
A total logical breach.
According to the systemic error handling in our analytical framework, this interpretation must be immediately flagged and discarded.
Throw it out.
It is a logical breach of the highest order. The text itself is screaming at us that they were arguing about ethos man-made tradition.
Specifically, that Giyur conversion manual we just mapped out.
Exactly. They were arguing over the toll booth, not the highway.
The toll booth, not the highway. That's the core of it.
The written Torah of Sinai was never on trial in Acts 15. The Creator's laws regarding theft, murder, the Sabbath, or clean and unclean meats were simply not up for debate.
They were even on the table.
Right. What was on trial was the institutional cultural red tape that religious men had heavily layered over the Torah to control who was allowed to participate in it.
Man, that distinction between the toll booth and the highway is everything.
It clarifies the whole narrative.
It really does. The Pharisees were essentially saying, you can't drive on the highway of the covenant unless you use our specific, expensive, man-made toll booth.
Which brings us to the council itself.
Right. The apostles are gathering in Jerusalem,
Yeah.
and they're about to respond to this crisis. So how do they navigate this?
It's a brilliant legal response.
We have identified the crisis as a battle over man-made ethos. How does James, or Yaakov, to use his actual Hebrew name, structurally bypass this entrenched rabbinic manual to solve the crisis?
Because he is the one presiding over this council, right?
Yeah, and he doesn't just bang a gavel and say, all right, guys, you are all under grace now. Just be good people and do whatever you want.
No, that would violate the action metric completely.
Right, there has to be execution. Instead, he issues a very specific, carefully worded legal decree.
Yes, he does. And to the untrained eye, reading the text without the proper historical framework, the decree James issues looks completely bizarre.
It looks totally random.
Almost absurd. In Acts 15.20, James bypasses the Pharisaic conversion manual entirely and says, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollutions of idols and from fornication and from things strangled and from blood.
Right. I remember reading that years ago and just thinking, what a strange list.
It feels very disjointed.
It really does. If you just read that on the surface, it feels like James pulled 4 random rules out of a hat.
Right. Let's pick these 4.
Yeah. No idolatry, no sexual immorality, don't eat an animal that was strangled, and don't eat blood. Why these 4 specific things?
Why not the big ones?
Exactly. Why not don't murder or don't steal? It feels incredibly disjointed.
It only feels disjointed if we lack the proper hermeneutical mechanics to trace his logic.
Okay, so let's trace it.
The notes of Mora Uriah utilize a specific principle of contextual deduction known in classical Hebrew hermeneutics as hakesh mi'inyano.
Hakesh mi'inyano. What does that dictate?
This principle dictates that we deduce the meaning, the origin, and the intent of a text from its surrounding context and its foundational historical anchors.
So we have to anchor it in the past.
Yes. When we apply hakesh mi'inyano to Acts 15, we see something truly brilliant.
James isn't just making things up.
Not at all. James did not invent a new 4-rule religion. He is executing a flawless legal maneuver.
Oh, I love legal maneuvers. Walk us through it.
He is tracing a direct line back past the Pharisees, past all the oral traditions, straight to the written civil code of Yahweh.
Straight to the Nomos.
Exactly. Specifically, he is pointing directly to the core statutes found in Leviticus chapters 17 and 18.
Okay, this is where the genius of the early assembly really shines. Let's untack this connection.
It's beautiful once you see it.
For the listener who isn't, intimately familiar with the exact structure of the Torah, what is so legally significant about Leviticus 17 and 18?
Good question.
Why does James point his arrow right at those specific chapters?
Leviticus 17 and 18 are the exact chapters in the foundational Torah baseline that define what is required of a stranger.
A stranger, like a non-Israelite.
Yes, a Giyur in Hebrew. It defines what is required of a Giyur who desires to dwell within the physical camp of Israel.
Ah, so it's immigration law.
It is the divine immigration law. The Torah has incredibly specific non-negotiable laws regarding what an outsider must immediately cease doing if they want to physically and socially integrate into the covenant community.
Without bringing judgment upon the camp.
Exactly. James is utilizing what Mora Uriah's notes call first-mention logic.
First-mention logic. So instead of dealing with the complex, corrupted system of his present day, he's going back to the very first time a concept is introduced in the biblical timeline.
Right, to establish its pure foundational DNA.
That is so smart.
It is. He bypasses the rabbinic Giyur process of the first century entirely and reverts to the original divine blueprint for how foreigners were historically integrated into Israel under Moses.
Okay, let's do a detailed side-by-side breakdown of these 4 decrees. I want to see the proof.
Let's map Acts 15 directly to the notes of Mora Uriah on Leviticus.
Okay, let's test the systemic consistency. James's rule number 1, pollution of idols.
This connects directly to Leviticus 17, verses 7 through 9.
What does that passage say?
This statute completely and utterly outlaws sacrificing to false gods, which the text explicitly identifies as demons.
Demons, wow, okay.
And the crucial part of the text states that this law is binding on both the native-born Israelite and the stranger, the Gur who sojourns among them.
So it's a universal baseline for the camp.
Yes. It was the absolute non-negotiable baseline for spiritual and physical purity in the camp.
And we also have to remember the socioeconomic reality of the first century.
Oh, definitely. Idolatry was everywhere.
Yeah, idolatry wasn't just like a private religious preference you did in your house.
Yeah.
It was the backbone of the Greco-Roman economy.
The meat markets were tied to temples.
Exactly. The trade guilds required homage to patron deities just to do business.
So James is saying the Gentile must immediately sever all ties with this systemic demonic architecture.
That makes perfect sense as an entry requirement.
All right.
Okay, rule number 2 is translated in Acts as fornication, or in the Greek, porneia.
Right, porneia. This maps perfectly to the entirety of Leviticus chapter 18.
The whole chapter.
Yes, Leviticus 18 is a comprehensive, detailed moral code. It outlaws a slew of detestable sexual practices: incest, adultery, bestiality, and other severe abominations. And in verse 26 of that chapter, the Creator explicitly commands, let me quote it, "You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, neither any of your own nation, nor any stranger that sojourns among you."
Nor any stranger. There it is again.
Exactly. It applies to the Gur.
Wow.
The text explains that these specific practices were so vile, so structurally contrary to the Creator's design, that they literally defiled the physical land itself.
Oh, land would vomit them out.
Yes, causing the land to vomit out its inhabitants.
And again, applying historical contextualism, the Roman and Greek world of the first century was completely saturated with sexual practices that violated this baseline.
Oh, completely. Temple prostitution was rampant.
Yeah, temple prostitution, normalized pedophilia in certain Greek circles, massive public promiscuity.
An incoming Gentile had to immediately abandon the sexual economy of the empire and adopt the Torah's strict standard of purity.
That is a massive, massive paradigm shift for a Roman convert.
A total lifestyle overhaul.
Okay, rule number 3, things strangled. This one always sounds so strange to modern ears.
It does seem oddly specific.
Yeah, what does strangling an animal have to do with profound theology, and what is the Leviticus connection there?
This connects directly to Leviticus 17, verse 13. The Torah instructs that any hunted beast or fowl that is lawful to eat must have its blood poured out and covered with dust.
Poured out, okay.
Yes, this is about the mechanics of proper, humane slaughter and having reverence for life.
Ah, so if you strangle it.
If you strangle an animal or use a snare that traps it and suffocates it, the blood remains trapped inside the meat.
Oh, gross.
Right. Eating a strangled animal blatantly breaks this explicit written mandate for how both the native and the stranger must handle their food.
Which logically leads right into the fourth and final rule of James's decree: blood.
Yes, the prohibition of consuming blood.
Where is that in Leviticus?
This is anchored securely in Leviticus 17, verses 10 through 14.
And what's the severity of that law?
The commandment is absolute and severe. Consuming blood guarantees that the Creator will set his face against that soul and completely cut them off from the people.
Wow, cut off. That's the highest penalty.
Yes. Whether you are a native Israelite or a stranger dwelling among them, the blood must be drained completely.
Because the blood is the life.
Exactly. The blood represents the life force of the creature, and it is strictly reserved for atonement on the altar. It is not for human consumption under any circumstance.
And again, in the Roman world, consuming blood like eating blood sausages or drinking blood in certain pagan rituals was totally common.
Very common. It was standard practice in many cults.
This is incredible. When you lay it out side by side like this, the randomness completely vanishes.
It becomes a highly structured legal response.
It really does. You realize James isn't just throwing darts at a theological dartboard trying to find a compromise between two angry groups.
No, he is acting as a brilliant legal scholar.
He is looking at the Pharisees and basically saying, we don't need your newly invented, burdensome custom of Giyur.
We don't need your rabbinic toll booth.
Yes. The Creator already gave us the perfect legal blueprint for how a stranger enters the camp. It has been sitting in Leviticus for 1,500 years. We hold them to the Leviticus Giyur laws.
That is precisely the mechanism at work here.
It's beautiful.
By legally executing the written Nomos of Leviticus, James completely invalidates the man-made ethos of the Pharisees.
He just cuts the legs right out from under their argument.
He cuts through all the bureaucratic red tape by reverting to the absolute baseline of the Creator's unchanging nature. He restores the proper operational order.
Okay, this is a beautiful legal maneuver, but it brings up the next major question.
And what's that?
Well, it's a logical one that I think a lot of listeners, especially those who have been taught traditional theology their whole lives, are probably asking right now.
Let's address it.
Let me push back on this framework for a second.
Please do.
If these 4 rules from Leviticus are just the ancient entry-level requirements for foreigners, what was the end game?
The end game.
I mean, were these Gentiles supposed to just keep these 4 rules forever?
I see where you're going.
Because if that's true, James is effectively creating a 2-tiered religion where Jewish believers have to keep the whole Torah, all the dietary laws, the Sabbaths, the feast days, and Gentile believers only have to keep 4 basic rules.
That would be a huge problem.
It sounds like the exact opposite of the absolute unity we talked about at the beginning of the deep dive. It sounds like a total fracture in the law.
It does.
So what was the actual long-term plan here?
That is the perfect analytical question to ask. And it requires us to look closely at James's immediate operational reasoning.
Did he give a reason?
He did. He doesn't just issue the 4 rules and stop talking. He provides the structural logic for his decision in the very next verse, Acts 15.21.
Oh, really? Let's look at that.
The notes of Mora Uriah highlight this specific verse as the definitive key that unlocks the entire chapter.
What does he say?
After listing the 4 prohibitions regarding idols, sexual immorality, strangled things, and blood, James says this. For Moses, from former generations, has in every city those preaching him, in the synagogues, every Sabbath being read.
For Moses is read in the synagogues every Sabbath.
Yes.
Okay, I need help connecting the dots here. How does a statement about people reading Moses on Saturday explain the long-term plan for these Gentile converts?
We have to understand what Mora Uriah's notes refer to as the on-ramp strategy.
The on-ramp strategy.
Yes, which relies heavily on the hermeneutical principle of covenantal layering.
Okay, lay that out for me.
These 4 rules from Leviticus were never meant to be a comprehensive new law code that somehow overwrote the rest of the Torah for Gentiles.
Because that would be replacement theology, essentially, overriding the baseline.
Exactly. If James was creating a new 4-rule religion that erased the rest of Moses, he would be violating the systemic consistency of the entire canon.
He would be changing the Creator's baseline.
Right, and the axiomatic foundation says the Creator's nature is unchanging. You can't just delete the foundational moral instructions like the Sabbath or the dietary laws just because someone happens to be Greek.
Right. Truth is truth no matter your ethnicity.
Correct. The 4 rules from Leviticus were not the final destination. They were the clean entry pass.
Spiritual triage.
Exactly. They were spiritual and physical triage. You have to put yourself in the cultural reality of the first century.
Okay, let's go there.
The Gentile world was heavily saturated in extreme pagan defilement.
Like we talked about with the temples and the blood.
Yes. Now, a traditional Jewish believer who has kept kosher and strictly avoided idolatry their entire life, physically and legally could not break bread or sit in a small enclosed room with a Gentile who was actively participating in temple prostitution.
Or eating blood-soaked meat from sacrifices.
Exactly. Doing so would cause an immediate legal, ritual, and social fracture within the assembly.
They couldn't even eat at the same table.
They literally couldn't. So by enforcing these specific 4 rules right out of the gate, James is solving the immediate, practical crisis of fellowship.
He is making it socially possible for them to sit at the same table.
Yes. By abandoning these specific, extreme pagan defilements, a Gentile became socially and ritually compatible.
They were clean enough to walk through the door.
They were clean enough to walk into the local assemblies alongside Jewish believers without causing a riot or defiling the sacred space.
It is a brilliant, highly structured discipleship strategy.
It really is. Drop the gross paganism, get clean enough to walk through the doors, and then what?
Then you learn.
Exactly. Then, as James explicitly states in verse 21, you enter the synagogue and you hear the written Torah Moses read and taught every single Sabbath.
Oh, man. Let me try to build a modern analogy for this because this paints such a clear operational picture in my head.
I'd love to hear it.
Let's think about this like contributing to a massive, complex, open-source software project, something like Linux.
Okay, software development,
Yeah.
I see it.
Right. The 4 rules from Leviticus are like the basic security clearance and formatting rules you have to agree to just to get an account on the platform.
The terms of service.
Exactly. You have to prove you aren't a malicious hacker, you aren't going to upload viruses, and you know how to format your basic text.
Otherwise, you corrupt the whole system.
Right. If you can't pass that baseline security check, you can't even view the code.
That is a highly functional parallel.
Yeah, but the security clearance isn't the actual goal.
No, it's just the start.
You don't get your login credentials and say, great, I've mastered the entire operating system, my work here is done. That would be ridiculous.
You haven't written a single line of code yet.
Exactly. The 4 rules get you access to the repository. But once you have access, the goal is to log in week after week, study the master code base, and actually learn how the system works.
And in this case, the code base is Moses.
It's the Torah. It's the foundational baseline of the Creator's instructions being read aloud and taught every single Sabbath in every city.
Your software analogy perfectly aligns with the principle of covenantal layering.
It makes so much sense now.
The entry requirements do not replace the master code. They facilitate your access to it so you can begin the lifelong process of integration.
Wow.
Mar Uriah's notes make it explicitly clear that this was a weekly educational trajectory. The Gentiles were not expected to instantly master the entire Torah before they could be considered saved.
Because that was the Pharisaic era of Giyur.
Exactly, demanding instant, total conformity through a man-made ritual toll booth before extending grace.
Which is impossible anyway.
James's solution was a functional on-ramp. Come in, get clean of the paganism that separates us, and let the word of God wash over you.
Educate you.
Yes, educate you, and transform your actions week by week, Sabbath by Sabbath.
It is such a graceful, profoundly logical solution.
It honors the text and the people.
It honors the absolute authority of the Creator's written laws. It deeply welcomes the outsider without overwhelming them. And it completely dismantles the arrogant gatekeeping of the rogue toll booth.
It's a masterstroke.
But as we look at this incredible system, we have to address the elephant in the room.
Which is?
And this is where the rubber really meets the road for anyone listening today. Knowledge, no matter how profound, is only valuable when it is applied.
Yes. The application.
Right. Sitting in a synagogue, listening to the Torah, or logging into a repository to look at code doesn't make you a master if you never actually write anything.
If you never execute.
Hearing Moses read on the Sabbath is structurally void if it doesn't result in physical execution in your daily life.
And this is exactly where we must return to the action metric.
Because we established that faith requires physical action.
We must look at James's own internal consistency regarding what happens after a believer hears the word.
Right, because James didn't just speak at the council. He wrote an epistle.
Exactly. The historical event in Acts 15 does not exist in a vacuum. To maintain systemic consistency, Mora Uriah's notes cross-reference the Acts 15 decree with James's own written epistle.
Which verses specifically?
Specifically, James chapter 1, verses 21 through 25.
Okay, let's look at that text. Because when you connect the book of James back to the synagogue on-ramp we just discussed, the entire picture locks together.
It really does.
What does James write to the believers in that chapter?
James writes, "Wherefore, having put aside all filthiness and superabundance of evil, in meekness, receive the engrafted word that is able to save your souls, and become doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves."
Become doers of the word and not hearers only.
That's the core of it.
This directly targets that passive Hellenistic philosophy we barred from our framework at the very beginning of the deep dive.
It annihilates it.
That toxic idea that you can just passively believe something in your mind, sit in a seat, and be spiritually fine.
Yes, James is outlining the exact sequence of events that must happen in those weekly assemblies.
Let's break down his sentence structure.
Look at the structure. First, you put aside all filthiness and superabundance of evil. That maps perfectly to the 4 prohibitions from Acts 15.
You drop the idols, the fornication, the blood, you leave the paganism at the door.
Exactly. Second, you receive the engrafted word.
That is the process of sitting in the synagogue, hearing Moses read every Sabbath.
Yes. But the third step is the absolute crux of the action metric. You must become a doer of the word.
A doer.
Passive, abstract, intellectual belief. Just listening to the Torah week after week, agreeing that it's beautiful, but without changing your physical behavior, is completely non-functional.
James literally calls it self-deception.
You're just lying to yourself.
And he gives us this incredible, vivid analogy right after that verse to drive the point home, ensuring no one misses his logic.
The mirror analogy.
Right. He talks about a man looking in a mirror.
He says that if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man viewing his natural face in a mirror.
Okay.
He looks at himself, walks away, and immediately forgets what he looks like.
He does nothing about what he saw.
Right. But the one who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, being a doer of work, this one shall be happy or blessed in his doing.
Let's dig into this mirror analogy, because I think it connects so deeply to how we process information today.
It's extremely relevant.
The Torah, the written baseline of the Creator, acts as a perfectly calibrated mirror.
It reflects reality.
When you sit in the synagogue, or when you study the source texts, or even when you listen to an in-depth analysis like we are doing today, the Word of God reflects your true structural state back to you.
It shows you the truth of who you are.
Right. It shows you your misalignments, your areas of selfishness, where your actions are violently violating the baseline.
It provides objective theological processing.
Yes.
It removes your personal bias and reveals precisely where your physical actions are out of alignment with the Creator's unchanging nature.
Let's use an engineering analogy here to avoid, religious cliches. There's like an aeronautical engineer examining the structural stress on an airplane wing using high-tech imaging.
Like an X-ray of the metal.
Exactly. The imaging, the mirror, shows you exactly where the microfractures are. It shows you where the wing is going to fail under pressure.
The data is right there on the screen.
And what James is saying is that the ultimate tragedy, the absolute height of self-deception, happens when you look at that imaging, you clearly see the fractures in the wing, and then you just turn off the screen, walk away, and clear the plane for takeoff without fixing anything.
That would be criminal negligence.
It would. You become a hearer only. You saw the truth, but you refused to execute the repair.
This is the ultimate danger of stripping away the action metric.
It leads to a crash.
If we define faith as mere intellectual assent, if we let Hellenistic philosophy convince us that right thinking is enough, we create a generation of people who stare into the mirror of the perfect law of liberty, acknowledge its beauty and its structural perfection, but refuse to let it dictate their physical actions.
We just become academics staring at a broken wing.
In the structural framework we are mapping out today, based on Mora Uriah's notes, covenantal love is intimately, permanently tied to commandment guarding.
Love is a verb.
Love is not an emotion you feel while listening to a sermon. Love is the physical action you take when you leave the building.
Yes.
Faith implies faithfulness, steadfastness, and the active execution of the instructions given by the ultimate authority.
It's not about just absorbing information like a sponge.
No, the sponge has to be squeezed.
It's not about just attending a first-century synagogue and nodding along to the reading of Moses or, downloading theological deep dives today and feeling smart because you know Greek words.
That's just intellectual vanity.
It is about allowing that foundational Torah baseline to literally rewrite your physical actions.
It has to change your daily habits.
Your interactions with your family, your business ethics, how you spend your money, what you eat. It is about execution.
Exactly. The man who looks into the perfect law of liberty and becomes a doer of work is the one who is actually operating within the covenant parameters.
And the phrase James uses, the perfect law of liberty, is such a fascinating paradox to the modern mind.
It really is, isn't it?
Because to the Western, Hellenized mind, law and liberty seem like total polar opposites.
We think liberty means the absence of all rules. Don't tell me what to do.
Exactly. But in the Hebraic biblical framework, true liberty is only found within the strict boundaries of the Creator's instructions.
Without boundaries, you just have chaos.
Right. When you operate outside those boundaries, you are not free, you are enslaved. You're enslaved to sin, to chaos, to the pollutions of the world, and eventually to destruction.
The written Nomos provides the exact engineered parameters for human flourishing.
It's like the rules of a highly complex game, like chess.
Chess, okay.
If I sit down at a chessboard and say, I want absolute liberty, I'm going to move the pawns backward and the knights in a straight line, you aren't actually playing the game freely.
You aren't playing chess at all.
You've just destroyed the game entirely. The rigid rules of how the pieces move are the exact mechanism that allows for infinite brilliant strategies and true freedom of play.
That is profound.
The foundational Torah baseline is the rules of the board. The Pharisaic custom of Giyur was an attempt by arrogant players to invent new, impossible rules and force everyone else to abide by them before they could even sit at the table.
You have to pay me to play.
Right. And James just flipped the board, pointed back to the original rule book in Leviticus, and said, start here, learn how the pieces move, and let the master teach you the rest of the strategy as you play.
That is a tremendous synthesis of the entire historical and theological conflict. It perfectly encapsulates the trajectory from the crisis in Antioch to the resolution in Jerusalem.
So let's take a moment and pull all these threads together, because we have covered a massive amount of historical and analytical ground today, relying heavily on the meticulous research in Mor Uriah's notes.
We definitely covered a lot.
We started by defining the actual crisis in Acts 15. It was not a debate about whether the law of God was abolished.
Not at all.
It was the Pharisaic toll booth of Giyur demanding physical surgery, immersion, and a literal temple sacrifice just for a Gentile to be considered legitimate.
A massive, unbiblical roadblock.
Then we applied linguistic primacy and discovered the massive, crucial difference between man-made ethos cultural custom and the written Nomos, the actual statutory law of God.
Which completely invalidated the modern narrative that the Torah was on trial.
Exactly. And by understanding that distinction, we were able to utilize contextual deduction to decode James's 4 prohibitions.
We mapped them directly back to the Leviticus Giyur laws.
The foundational first-mentioned blueprint for integrating a stranger into the physical and spiritual camp, requiring them to completely sever ties with idolatry, sexual immorality, and the pagan consumption of blood.
Which led us right into the brilliance of the on-ramp strategy.
Yes. These 4 rules were the clean entry pass, the basic security clearance, allowing Gentiles to enter the local assemblies without causing a massive social fracture.
This allowed them to fulfill the actual goal, hearing the Torah, Moses, read and taught every single Sabbath.
And finally, we anchored all of this in the action metric. We looked at James's strict command that hearing the word, even staring deeply into the perfect law of liberty, is functionally useless unless it translates into physical active execution.
You must be a doer of the word.
When you apply the right analytical tools, filter out the historical anachronisms, and bypass the translational biases, the systemic consistency of the text is just flawless.
It really is. The structural harmony between the ancient laws of Leviticus, the historical narrative of Acts, and the practical theology of James operates like a perfectly engineered machine.
It takes a chapter that has been used for centuries to justify abolishing the Creator's instructions, and it flips it completely upside down,
turning it into a masterpiece of legal clarity that actually upholds the Torah.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, we have to bring this directly to you, the listener.
Because it's about execution.
Right. We spent an hour dissecting first-century toll booths, Greek linguistics, and ancient rabbinic customs. But human nature is shockingly consistent.
The timeline changes, but the behavior doesn't.
We still build artificial toll booths today.
Indeed. If the entire architecture of the early assembly, guided by the apostles, was designed to fiercely strip away man-made religious customs so that believers could actively walk out the foundational laws of the Creator unhindered, we are required to apply that same rigorous audit to our own modern lives.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to mull over as you close out this deep dive and go about your week.
What is it?
What modern institutional traditions are currently functioning as a toll booth in your own life?
That's a powerful question.
Are there religious customs, cultural expectations, or human-made rules that your community has elevated to the level of divine law? Rules that are creating artificial, exhausting barriers between you and the pure, straightforward instructions of the Creator.
We all have them, if we look closely enough.
And conversely, take a hard look into the mirror of the Word. What passive, abstract beliefs are you holding on to in your head right now that you have entirely failed to convert into physical, covenantal action?
Where are you just a hearer?
Exactly. Where are you just looking at the fractures in the wing and then walking away, completely forgetting what you saw?
The ultimate challenge presented by the action metric is to ruthlessly dismantle the artificial roadblocks in your mind and commit fully to the active execution of the absolute baseline.
Remember the open highway we talked about at the very beginning?
The road is paid for.
The invitation of the Messiah is real, and his blood is entirely sufficient to grant you access. Don't let anyone past or present force you into a rogue toll booth.
But you still have to drive.
But equally important, don't just park your car on the side of the road thinking that just knowing the route is enough to get you to the destination.
You have to put the car in drive.
Keep driving, keep executing, and keep seeking the truth. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.